Every day, you essentially pay your dues by doing the harder thing when it's the right thing to do.
When you get to a certain age, when you're a senior athlete, in tumbling for sure, because if you've been coached well and you're a senior level international class athlete, you know all the skills. Now you can do full in, full out, full, Miller, triple tuck, triple pike, hopefully full and triple. Now it's about time, just put it in the middle of the track, transition out of it, figure it out, get stronger, get faster, whatever. And I think at that point, gymnastics happens, or your performance is influenced and just significantly more of what happens outside of the gym. You don't need to be in the gym 25 hours a day,
Right.
25 hours a week. Sorry. You need to be in the gym just a little bit, but then you need to sleep well every night. You need to eat well. You need to eat well. Not every single day. We're not trying, no one is like the food police. Like it makes no sense. Some people love that. Some people enjoy the feeling of, I don't like junk food. But some people need that for their mental health.
Right.
Just because, if they feel like they're like constantly being their own police, that's just a bad feeling. And then it just comes down to how much are you willing to sacrifice outside of the gym? It's not about you coming into the gym and doing more.
Miley O'Keefe is one of the best, collegiate gymnasts now, but she was winning juniors when she was like younger. And I had the opportunity to do a lot of camps at their gym with Tammy and Sarin. And when I tell you that Miley was an absolute stick of dynamite on beam at a young age, that girl could like literally open the code and do whatever she wanted. But watching how they managed her reps and managed her body and managed technically was really eye-opening for me, which was, I think she was working like side aerial, layout, step out, full, like just insane series, like just ridiculous, right? Like, but like you would watch her do like aerial layout, step out, and it'd be a little bit off. And Tammy would just watch and say, like, let's try another go. She would do another one. It's kind of off. And she'd be like, okay, let's come off the high beam. Let's figure out, why is this happening? Are your hips square? Go back to the laser beam. Let's do some drills. Like it was just this like almost like poetic process of two people working together to like reverse engineer why it's not going well. What can we do? What drills do we have? Is this a flexibility thing? Is it a strength thing? Are we just tired today and we just got to hang it up and come back tomorrow? Like just really thoughtful execution of like a beam. And like maybe she did 7 series over the course of a half hour. But it was just so particular, right? And I think that's one of the reasons, and Miley was just on the podcast, and she's like, I think one of the reasons why I never had any major injuries, knock on wood, before going to college, is she was like, I was never just getting thrown to volume. I was never just doing layout, step outs, and all these things over and over. Even at the pinnacle of her junior career, it was still very slow and methodical and, very critical on the way she did it. And yeah, I think it's a big reason why she probably never had a back fracture. She probably never had, something crazy. And with double twisting Yurchenko too, when she was younger, she just wasn't strong enough to get enough whip action onto the board to get high enough. Like physically, she just hadn't grown enough and she wasn't strong enough and technique just didn't make sense. And Sarin, her other coach, would just, nope, we're not doing it on hard today. Nope, we're not ready yet. Like we're at national camps, we're not quite ready yet. Like, and Sarin would just sit there and smile and just take the heat from Miley. Like, no, we're not doing it. We're not ready yet. And she said, Miley was just like, one day I just got it. Maybe I was strong. Maybe it just happened that day and it worked. And then she did it. It was well, but like the amount, back to like full circle, this conversation, the amount of self-awareness and the amount of work it takes to be critically thinking through skills and not just getting angry and being like, just go. I just want you to go. You know what I mean? Like mental blocks in particular, like it takes so much resolve and self-esteem, and it takes a spine to stand up to some of the pressures when people want you to do these high level skills or push at a certain age. Like there's this, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with this study, but there was a study from Google and they tried to measure the most highly productive teams. And they tried to measure who is the most productive, who does the most. And then also there was a really good book called The Culture Code, which looked at Navy SEALs. They looked at, I want to say like maybe like the LA basketball team. I forget what it's called, but they just looked at like the most successful high performing teams. And obviously the SEALs in America, right? Like there's a lot on the line, right? And what they found is that the highest performing teams have psychological safety. And what psychological safety is that in a work setting, you're able to present ideas that come to you openly and on the cuff, and no one's going to shit on you when, you say something, and that can be like, are you kidding me? Like, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Right. Like, and on the SEALs team side or the basketball side or whatever. It's that there's an environment, a culture that fosters, not only fosters the ability and the safety to make mistakes and be okay with it, but they actually encourage it because they want to hear people are thinking openly and without fear of judgment, without people, jumping on top of their negativity or whatever. But that translates to a gymnastics environment or a sporting environment, which is you're building an environment. You have to build a culture and an environment that it's okay to mess up, because that is where that critical feedback loop comes of, okay, what went wrong? Why did it go wrong? Let's reverse engineer it. Let's break this down. Let's find some drills. That's a constructive way to build that skill set. And that's a massively important skill for life. But you can make the argument that probably the same phenomenon of when you make a mistake or you eat it or something doesn't go well, do your teammates support you and say, hey, that's normal, that's how it goes, this
Yeah.
is how we learn? Does
Yeah.
your coach do that? Or is it like side eye and gossip and psychological warfare of like, of course you missed her series, like it's that dynamic you build. And not only is it about being okay with mistakes, like you don't want to encourage people to screw up, obviously, but people generally are trying to do the best they can. But it's about being like, this is how we learn, and reframing that as this is productive. This is all perfection at all times, no matter what. And that becomes extremely damaging, right? And you could argue that's where a lot of the concerns come up with body image, right? And with health and the way they look, and a lot of people being nervous about that because you always have to be shredded and six pack and lean and gymnast fit, which is the most bullshit term I've ever heard of, right? It makes you think that you always have to be this perfect thing. You have to be perfect execution. It's never good enough. How do you think kids get into a massive loop of depression when it's never good enough? It's always more. It's now always not
Yeah.
good enough. Okay, you made one turn good. Now you make 5 turns perfect. You won at this meet. Now win all your meets. You made this team, great. Now make this team. You made the Olympics, great. Make it again. You made a gold medal, good. Win a gold medal the next quad. It's like, Jesus Christ, like that's just an impossible, relentless standard, and that's how a lot of coaches and young kids get in a really dark spot because they think that if I make it, it should be better, and if I don't do it, I'm a piece of shit, and I feel awful about it, right? So like you have this unrelenting standard, which is when you do it, it's not good enough, and if you don't do it, you're awful. So when you're trying to maximally absorb force on your spine and land and dissipate those forces with what's called angular displacement, we know that the way the spinal structures are set up is it's a middle rod of the spine with discs in between and ligaments and things that on their own can really not take a lot of force if they're just floating in space, like in a spine model in the lab. You need this very robust structure of core muscles around it, transverse abdominis, obliques, pelvic floor, diaphragm, anterior, posterior core, whatever. It works best when it's neutral. I mean, neutral is slightly arched for the record because there's a lordotic curve. So, but a
Mhm.
braced neutral can absorb more forces compression wise because it disperses outward everywhere than a really hollow spine, right? Because when a really hollow spine is taking load, it flexes this way and it puts pressure backwards, which can create
Yeah.
discogenic irritation. So we know from an optimal performance of accepting load that neutral slight arch with compression and embraced breathing in your pelvic floor diaphragm is aligned, that can spring mechanism take the most impact. Okay. So with that being said, when I have somebody punch on floor, I think it's probably more ideal from a maximal force absorption and pressure to be in a neutral canister. But in the sport specific context, if I'm trying to translate momentum horizontally down the floor to get whip potential, you could see the argument that rounding that shape into a dish or a hollow is going to scoop the feet under and translate that down the floor faster to get more power. I wouldn't necessarily train them to bounce in flexion. I would try to build up the sport specific drills around that, right? So like it's teaching good whips, like snap down whip, right? And like teaching how to create body tension on a safe, slow position first. Can you hollow on the floor? Can you dish on the floor and show rounded spine and arms overhead? Can you do that? Okay, let's add a 2 kilo weight. Can we do that with rocks? Can we do that under pressure? Like you just slowly build their capacity in a sport specific way. In the same way, when someone is a kid and they're throwing in baseball, they throw X amount of pitches at X miles per hour or X feet, and it builds up resilience of their elbow over time to handle those forces, right? So you wouldn't ask some kid to do round off, whip back, hollow right away. You would do loads of physical preparation and loads of core strength and stuff before, in the same way that elite level power lifters wouldn't start with a 100 kilo stone. They would start with a lot of physical prep work and a lot of conditioning work to get their back to do that and understand this is what it feels like to brace my spine in this flexed position with a 10 kilo, then a 15 kilo, then 25 kilo, right? Over the course of 2 to 3 years. It's the same sport specific conversation. How do you get someone to tolerate the bottom of a stalder when their back is super flexed? And that's the same kind of concept here as well. You start in physical prep. You do stalder ups, very slow. Then you do some rocks. Then you do strap bar. Then you do stoops. Then you do stoop handstands. Then you do some more. Then you do it faster under load. But that takes 6 months to develop. So you can maximize the underlying physical capacity with lots of core work and lots of specific stuff, which is why I'm such a fan of doing like general weightlifting, because farmer carries and sled pushes are a great way to build up your tolerance to this kind of stuff. But then you slowly
Mm.
just introduce sport specific drills that help kind of build their capacity and build their ability to handle those very sport specific loads. That's what good sports training is on different surfaces, is trying to teach that exposure very slowly over time to build up capacity on top of that. I think a concept that's really important for all gymnastics, but particularly tumbling, is that these basic shapes you have to get to maximize power, whether it's an arch, whether it's a hollow, whether it's an impact and twisting, whatever. Sometimes the basics of the basics are what need more attention. What I mean by that is, do you have the ability to open your hips fully into extension and get your arms fully over your head, your T-spine to extend? Do you have a very strong basis of your legs to handle that force, and a very strong basis of your core? And I think, again, not to beat a dead horse or go too crazy, but like that's why I'm such an advocate of evidence-based strength and conditioning and weight training as a complement to gymnastics training. I think that it fills in the gaps of what you're not doing.